Welcome and bienvenue à votre conférence des utilisateurs. It's a wonderful to be back with you again at such a huge gathering. I'm just looking out over this sea of faces. It's hard to believe how much we've grown in the last 6 years since the 2019 conference, and our conferences were stopped by COVID. And having watched this fantastic story from Canadian Tire, I agree 100% that GIS is integrating everything everywhere. We're seeing that all over the world, as a matter of fact, but particularly in Canada. Canada is the largest Esri organization outside of the United States. And just last week, Jack Kligerman showed this slide at an infrastructure conference, and you can see the enormous growth. 700,000 organizations around the world, and that has grown since 1983, when the very first installation of ArcInfo anywhere was at the New Brunswick Department of Natural Resources. Scott Moorhouse flew up with a 9-track tape with the software, the source code. He installed the source code. He wrote the drivers for the digitizing tables, and the journey began, that we have reached now 700,000 organizations over that time, since 1983. The next year, I was at the time working with Jack Kligerman as a consultant in the Ontario government, doing an Ontario user needs study. And over the next year, we decided that we were going to start Esri Canada, and our journey began in 1984. And for those of you who may not remember 1984, because maybe it's a long time ago in your mind, or maybe you weren't even born. I think there's a lot of people. Who was not born in 1984? Hands up. Oh my goodness, that's unbelievable. Well, just in case you want a little flashback, there was a relatively new pope who came to Toronto and held the largest outdoor mass ever that held at that time. I was a project manager on building the altar for that mass. Wayne Gretzky led the Oilers to their first Stanley Cup, and there was and there was a federal election just after a guy named Trudeau took a walk in the snow and stepped down. So things haven't changed that much, except the Canadian team did not win this time. So it wasn't quite a fairy tale story. So what did 1984 bring? So we started off, our very first project was with the Agriculture Resource Inventory for the province of Ontario. They had been making maps for a number of years, paper maps, sending students out every summer for years, doing an inventory of the agriculture in the province of Ontario. And they got some money and said, can you guys digitize this? And we put together a team of 20 people, ran 3 shifts on these digitizing tables, running 24 hours a day during the week, and we ended up building this beautiful inventory that still exists on Ontario's Land Information Hub. And I made a map a couple of days ago with the latest version of ArcGIS Online that included that data and included the new base maps that we have underneath it. So the message here is what you are doing today in creating information and creating data is going to be important 40 more years down the road. In fact, it becomes more important as our world is changing as fast as it is. 1984 was also the year that we held our very first user conference in Toronto at the Delta Chelsea. Here are the organizations that were there at that conference. There were 7 organizations and 20 people that attended this very first conference. And someone came up to me this morning, Colin Lang from JD Irving, there he is right over here, is here at this conference after 41 years that Al Brackley, the first GIS manager there, attended his very first user conference with us. A few years later, 1989, we began our not-for-profit program, which is growing substantially. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But Ducks Unlimited was founded in the 1930s to improve habitat for waterfowl, funded largely by American duck hunters, but then it became a nation, and the habitat was mostly in Canada, so the bulk of their work was done here. But Ducks Unlimited is now really become a Canadian organization and going far beyond just restoring habitat. What you're looking at here is the Okamic Marsh, 10,000 acres that they restored. And they're also working on thousands of projects across the country with many partners. And once again, this is a map I made a couple of days ago from the web service that they put up over the last 30 years to create inventory of wetlands all across Canada. And this is another shot of Okamic Marsh. Move forward to 1997, and we began our K-12 program in schools, our educational program. We started it in partnership with the University of Toronto's Ontario Institute for the Studies in Education, OISE, and a laboratory school at the University of Toronto for a 7 to 12 school. And we worked with one of the profs at University of Toronto and the teachers and developed the very first ARC Canada CD. And the team that was assembled that started then 2 years ago won the Alex Trebek Medal for Geographic Literacy, and here they are being presented at the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And the same team led our Education and Research Conference a few weeks ago at Hart House at the University of Toronto, where 266 people came from across Canada to give presentations on the research that they're doing. In 2008, we, unlike Canadian Tire, couldn't afford to set up our own charitable organization, but we started donating much more money to the United Way. We upped our match for each employee's dollar contributed to the United Way to $2, and as a result have raised a lot of money for the United Way over the year. But far more importantly, we've introduced them to GIS. And at our kickoff this year, one of their staff came out and presented some of the amazing work they're doing. They call this their Blue Dot map. It's actually 3-kilometer buffers around their hubs, which are urgent, where there is a need among the people. And we run a campaign every year and have a lot of fun. Here we are at our Pumpkin Palooza. Our Calgary office carved these pumpkins. Fast forward to 2009, and a group of people from the federal, provincial, governments and private sector companies were talking about having a base map that was made from government data, from authoritative data. We held a conference at the Kingbridge Conference Center up in King City, and the result of that conference was the Community Map of Canada. We began work on it, and we continue to work on it today. I've got a little bit more about this a little bit later on. Move forward to 2015, and as a result of the community map and its reach into communities across Canada, enabled us to actually kick off our own NG 911, Next Gen 911. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more a little bit later on. And finally, COVID struck in 2020, and we developed a COVID dashboard for Canada. When we put together with data from all of our user organizations across Canada, harvesting every night the breakout cases and what the risks were, all kinds of different stuff. And I sent this to a friend of mine, Dan Matheson, who's the mayor of Stratford. I didn't know this, but he grew up with Peter Mansbridge, and he sent it to Peter Mansbridge. He tweeted it out. We had 100,000 users in the first hour. It was just absolutely amazing, the impact that this had, and it reached through media impressions, tens of millions of people across Canada. In fact, I think they told us just one newspaper was 59 million alone. So here we are in 2025, and our mission and our purpose as an organization has not changed. It's supporting our users, supporting you in the work that you're doing. It never ceases to amaze me what you do, and we're going to see a lot more of that here today. But before we start that, I just want to give you a little update on Esri Canada. We now have 650 employees across 15 regional offices across Canada, and a couple of things we're working on. One that's we really feel very proud of our team that's done this is getting ISO certification for cybersecurity. This is an enormous problem for our users across the country. People are getting ransomware, hacked, taken down, and we've been fortunate to escape that, but we're not resting on our laurels. We got these 3 certifications, 27001, 017, 018, and we're on track by July to have one called ISO 31700. There's only 3 companies in the world that have that today, Environics and TELUS are 2 Canadian ones, and it's privacy by design. And I think as we go through the next 2 days, you'll see why that's important. The Community Map of Canada I already talked about. We have a climate change hub that's actually getting very large number of visitors, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. We've introduced managed cloud services for those who want to reduce the amount of staff they have working on it, but still get the same benefits as if they had ArcGIS Enterprise on their same servers. We've introduced a program for GIS professionals, a formal program. We have a program manager. Just like 2 years ago, we created an Indigenous program, and you saw Kelsey here. We now have a program manager for the GIS professional community development. And we're working with certification organizations, the organization that certifies GIS professional, GISP, and we're starting to hold workshops across the country that you can attend. And finally, our education group has got 7 centers of excellence across Canada, universities that are doing all kinds of interesting things, have directors, and we're starting to see the results of those showing up in very interesting work happening across Canada. So our communities continue to grow. You saw some of Adam's slides. They were absolutely remarkable slides. And I want to take you through a few of these organizations. You can see some of the numbers on here are quite amazing, but I'm going to just step through a few of them. So the federal government is a very large organization, as you know, and 48 departments in the federal government are using GIS. The Department of National Defense is probably one of the largest using it, and you can see people here in a training session. But they're also using it from all kinds of interesting things. This is the right whale navigation areas where there's risk areas and where they should be avoiding this. And we're going to actually see some of the work here a little bit later in our AI demos of looking not at right whales, but at belugas. And so this is a very interesting work that they're doing. 10 provinces, all provinces and territories are making extensive use of GIS. Many of you are from provincial government. Here, the provincial government in Saskatchewan is mapping their 911 locations. And the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, just a few weeks ago during their election, used ArcGIS Online and dashboards and Experience Builder to create an election dashboard that was live right from the beginning. That was their main tool. They provided the feeds to the media. Amazing, amazing work. Over 1,100 municipal governments across Canada are using GIS for all kinds of things. And one of the key things that everybody, if you're not doing it today, needs to do is get some kind of a hub up. This is the Muskoka GeoHub, really interesting hub. It's got a variety of apps on it and data sets that people can download, including LiDAR. And this application you're seeing on the side here is a LiDAR application that shows where flooding can happen, and it won the B-Spatial Award for Best Innovation in GIS at their conference earlier this year. Over 850 Indigenous communities and organizations. Here we see on the left the Anishinaabeg nations, 39 First Nations in Northern Ontario have come together to pool their resources and do all kinds of things like the 911 mapping and their communities for 911, but a big one is looking at the abandoned mining sites. These are mines that have been abandoned in their territories, and they're working with lots of different other organizations to clean these up. Over 100 utilities and telecommunications organizations across Canada. Here's some images from Milton Hydro. They call this HARD, Health of Assets and Reliability Dashboards. And they also have one here that looks at their pole inspections. Over 4,000 businesses across Canada. You just saw one of our premier Canadian businesses, Canadian Tire, just do an absolutely stellar look at what they're doing. And the one on the left is a map by Environics Analytics, looking at the drop in sales between 2019 and 2020. Visitors at the mall as everybody was locked down. And on the right, we see a map from CBRE, the real estate company, that's mapping scores that are what are the performance scores. So the green ones are scores that are higher. And over 3,500 schools teaching GIS across Canada, 240,000 educators and students using it every day. Over 540 nonprofit organizations. One of the smallest here is Shorefast on Fogo Island. Fogo Island is a little island off the North Atlantic coast. The fishery was destroyed by overfishing cod. They revived it by bringing in one of their native of Fogo, Zita Cobb, made a lot of money in tech, came back, built the Fogo Island Inn, and she's now working around the world helping organizations understand how small communities can get their mojo back. And one of the quotes out of this beautiful story map we're looking at here is, "Data is the key to building sustainable yet profitable marine resources." And finally, one of our marquee, largest nonprofit organizations is Trans-Canada Trail, who are all here sitting here in the front row today, and they're using the community map as an underpinning to we started in 1992 with them, using ArcInfo, all caps with a slash, to locate where the trail was going to be. And then in 2007, we continued again with helping them map and build out the entire trail. And they now have a very robust and strong GIS organization. If you want to find more about the trail, there's a beautiful, beautiful film here by a filmmaker, Deanne Whalen, called 500 Days in the Wild. And she starts out the film by saying, the name is 500 Days because that was my plan. It took me 1,800 days to hike, bike, paddle, and walk the entire length of the trail. So we're going to start now, switch to taking a look at our emerging communities here. And these emerging communities are the groups that existed before COVID. There were lots of people working this before COVID. You saw the NG 911. We had a team working on that already. And we've been working with planning departments for many, many years. The Indigenous program, we had Indigenous users, but we decided, given that without these user conferences going on, we had a little bit of money left over. We said, okay, let's invest it in building some new teams. So one of those teams that we built was looking at health. Of course, the COVID disaster was a health disaster, and we got deeply into it. But one of the real challenges with health is access to health. You read this about in the newspaper every day, or what communities are vulnerable and need more. So we decided to plunge forward and get ourselves a team. We went out looking for someone to lead them, and we ended up with Dr. Sandy Watts, who's an epidemiologist and is now leading a team of several people and doing real interesting things. So over to you, Sandy.
That's great. Thank you, Alec. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Today I'd like to showcase a couple of demos from our more strategic health initiatives at Esri Canada, both of which are really all about helping solve one of Canada's most pressing issues, and that is the primary care crisis, right? What we can see here, this is a common issue that we're seeing up here in Walkerton, Ontario. We can see that over 6.5 million Canadians, that's 1 in 5 people, do not have a family doctor or have access to a family care team, okay? So we can see that this is a similar scene, and in order for us to help connect people to accessible care, we first need to locate where those gaps exist, okay? So that takes us to our first demo. This is the ACES Geospatial Explorer. Now, ACES stands for the Acute Care Enhanced Surveillance System. This helps monitor emergency visits across Ontario in near real time. Now, the ACES team is based out of Southeast Public Health, so we collaborated with them in Kingston to help glean new geospatial insights on the gaps in primary care access across Ontario using this ACES data. Okay, so this is our Geospatial Explorer. This is actually built using the Esri Calcite system, so it's a custom application, which is great. And one of the first things we wanted to do was map out what we call the unattachment rate. That's the proportion of people who don't have a family doctor. So in this map, what you can see is a core pleth map. The darker the green polygons, the more we're seeing a rising rate in unattachment across Ontario. And these blue dots represent hospitals in these locations as well. So I can zoom right into these areas that we might think are concerning, right? I'm gonna look up here near Sault Ste. Marie. I can click on this FSA, and we can instantly identify we're seeing a change from 11% to over 18% in unattachment, right? This is an alarming rate. And of course, this might be influenced by COVID-19. This is between 2020 and 2022. But we can use this map to help pinpoint and prioritize other areas across Ontario. We're seeing this rising problem, right? Okay, next we wanted to bring in the ACES health trends data. So we got a cut of data from Southeast Public Health of anonymized ACES data from the fall of 2022. This amounts to around 500,000 records, right? But that's okay. Within this application, we can readily query and identify data for over 80 different conditions. You can see that here in this drop-down menu. Today, I'm just going to look at respiratory cases. I can click Map It, and we pretty much instantly and on the fly get a new choropleth map, in this case, sort of a hotspot activity of respiratory cases in darker purple here. So I can click on this polygon, and we can dive more deeply into the activity that's happening in this area. So this is great. We wanted to take it one step further, right? And so look at the ER visits within this area and see how people are traveling to this ER for respiratory cases. So I'm going to click on this Markdale Hospital in this location. I can click where are patients coming from, and we instantly get this spider diagram. This is sort of demonstrating or visualizing really the geographic reach of ER visits for respiratory cases in this hospital. Now this is sort of a stark image, right? Because it showcases that people are traveling in from distances way outside of the hospital's catchment area. In fact, I can even filter down this spider diagram by the severity of these cases. CTAS-1 score, this is really going to be life-threatening conditions like respiratory failure or cardiac arrest. We want these people in the ER, right? But CTAS-4 or CTAS-5, this is like low urgency conditions, like a sore throat, maybe a nagging cough, and we generally don't want people relying on the ER for care. And this is sort of demonstrating a big problem across Ontario, right? When people don't have a family doctor, in a lot of cases, they don't have a choice but to go to the ER for these minor conditions. And this contributes to another big part of this primary care crisis, which is emergency department burden, right? So generally speaking, this application helps uncover some new geographic insights, in some cases local insights, and again, in some of the drivers of the primary care crisis in Ontario. Where people seek care, why they seek care, and how we can improve access to care closer to home. In fact, this last point is top priority for Dr. Jane Philpott, who is the chair of Ontario's brand new primary care action team. And one of the ways she wants to resolve the primary care crisis is this concept of a health home. This is where you'd be assigned a family care team simply based on where you live. This is kind of like sending your kids to a school within your school district, right? Super intuitive, inherently spatial. So we collaborated with Dr. Philpott's team, that's the Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington, Ontario health team, to help model these health homes using GIS. So I'm going to show you how we did that here in Kingston. So here's our base map in Kingston. This is using the Community Map of Canada. Thank you to our contributors out there. And the first thing we wanted to do was bring in the locations of the participating clinics in this health home programs. These are the clinics that would sort of house the family care teams as part of the health home. So we've symbolized that here in red. I can click on any clinic and get that affiliate additional information for these participating clinics. But we also have information on the expanded clinic capacity. So basically the new number of patients that any clinic can take on with a new doctor or new healthcare professionals, right? So that's symbolized here in this red proportionate symbology. Okay, next, just like the ACES work, we wanted to bring in a measure of unattachment rate. But this time we needed to do it right down to the neighborhood level. So luckily, we could work with our partner Environics Analytics community health data set. This is modeled right down to the DA level, and so we've mapped this here as a hexagon map. The darker the hexagons, the more people who are sort of seeking family care want a family doctor on that roster list. Okay, so we've got the locations of our clinics. We have this unattachment rate mapped out. Next comes the fun stuff. So we wanted to model the health homes using, in this case, location allocation analytics. We did this in ArcGIS Pro to ultimately assign these clinics to really the neighborhoods in greatest need. And in this case, we also added some additional parameters, a 30-minute travel distance maximum. This is part of Jane Philpott's criteria for accessible healthcare, as well as that maximum clinic capacity I spoke about a moment ago. And so you can see, once again, in these spider diagrams, that there's a sort of maximum coverage that can be mapped out here based on that optimized allocation. So we worked with the FLA team to help refine these boundaries to be a bit more intuitive for the planners, and ultimately came up with these 6 discrete and optimized health homes across the Kingston area. Now, the great news about this is that the FLA team is already plugging this into action. They're already assigning patients who are over here in this purple health home, the East End Health Home, based on their roster lists. So we're so thrilled to see this already be plugged in and make a big difference. But the exciting part about this work is we realized that we have the potential to reduce down this attachment rate across Kingston by 33%. So we've tried to map this out using a reference size map, using ArcGIS Map Viewer in this case. Here, the darker purple dots as representing areas where we could potentially connect that unattached population to care, whereas the blue areas would be sort of remaining in need of care across these zones. But this is still important, right? We can now have planners target within these blue zones where future health homes, where future participating clinics, even allied health services like pharmacies can help fill those gaps in the meantime. Now, pharmacies are really important because here in Ontario, we can recently actually treat up to 13 minor ailments. This is like those CTAS-4 and 5 scores I was speaking about a moment ago. And so we actually integrated the locations of pharmacies. We just brought it right in from ArcGIS, from Esri Canada's Living Atlas, to identify the locations of pharmacies that could be of the greatest need, again, in these blue zones, as they wait to be connected to care. So just taking a step back here, the ACES demo that I showed you, the health home modeling work here, these both demonstrate how GIS can really help connect people to accessible, to equitable, and in this case, to local primary care. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. And Sandy's and his team are at the health boot kiosk out in the lunch area, and so feel free to go by and visit them and find out more about these amazing apps. So I want to make one just last comment about this. Those spider diagrams were going to people that we had modeled, like addresses that we had modeled from the Environics data for many other things, who might not have a family doctor. But the Ministry of Health knows who doesn't have a family doctor. They're the ones that are not sending in invoices, bills from a doctor. So that's one of the reasons why we're getting this 31700 privacy by design ISO certification, because we're going to be helping people work with very sensitive data. And we need to be able to make sure that privacy is fully protected. A next thing that really has made huge strides over the last 6 years is NextGen 911. So for those of you who don't know about NextGen 911, I think many of you do, municipalities are involved, is it's completely different than the way that happens if you call 911 today. 3 years ago, if you called 911, it thought you were a landline, and it pretended your mobile phone was a landline, and it retrieved the address of your phone. Well, of course, that's the address of your billing. But they hacked it and got kind of cell tower coordinates triangulated. A couple of years ago, after years of work, the switches were switched to receive, instead of phone numbers and home addresses, IP addresses and GPS coordinates. And over the next 5 years, starting going live in 2027, every phone call will take the address, do a point and polygon against all these layers that you see on here, the public safety answering point, the fire, the police, the ambulance zone. And so GIS becomes mission critical. And the requirements from the CRTC is that every municipality in Canada, everyone who manages their own territory for emergency, university campuses, and Indigenous communities as well, and large industrial sites, will have to update 5 layers, roads and addresses, the fire, police, ambulance boundaries, and the public safety boundaries within 72 hours of their creation. So the three telcos, Bell, TELUS, and SaskTel, are implementing the infrastructure to do this, and there's a kiosk out that you can go take a look at it. We're continuing to develop our public safety tools, and once again, during COVID, we created a new team for public safety. That team has, led by Joanne Fox, has got now a number of people, including people who have been former police officers, who are now working at things like interagency data sharing, an amazing application between the Toronto Police Service and the Durham Police Service to track people on bail. Similarly, where are they in the rest of the country? And also community safety and well-being, police being able to actually, public safety people, find other services like shelters and food banks. Our Indigenous program continues to grow. You heard, once again, I'll give a shout out to Kelsey for the amazing work he's done. But there's a couple of nice dashboards here. One is the Sechelt Nation in BC, mapping out the stewardship of their lands. And the second one on the side here is Kitikmayot, sorry, I'm hacking it up. Oh, Kitikmayot Nation, who are collecting traditional knowledge and storing this and preserving it for the future generations. We also started a lot more work on intelligent transportation systems. So before COVID, we were asked by the federal government to help them cement their relationship with the European Union through research projects between Canadian and European companies. So we partnered with Geotab and went together and created something called Smart Mobility, and several European companies as well. And we started modeling traffic at intersections. We started looking at real-time traffic insights. But it became clear as we went through this project, and it actually won multiple awards in Europe for the work it had done, and also from National Research Council. And we decided to create an intelligent transportation solutions team led by Dan Kligerman here, who came to us from TELUS. So we're going to turn things over to Dan and Matt English, who's going to be with him, our senior technical lead in the President's office, to give you a look at ITS.
Thank you, Alec. So traffic safety is a major, major issue in Canada. Tragically, more than 1,700 people lose their lives on our roadways every single year. This is a tragedy that we need to address, and in fact, cities across the country have Vision Zero initiatives. If you're not familiar with Vision Zero, it is to bring that number down to zero in terms of injuries and deaths on our roadways. We've been working on a solution to help with this. Sometimes making decisions about how to improve traffic safety is not as simple as it seems, and we have created a solution along with our partners Synexus to create a next generation modeling and simulation solution, not only in 2D, not only in 3D, but also in virtual reality. I'm going to show you what I mean. So here we have, imagine yourself immersed in this virtual reality scenario. Instead of just looking at a report about how to make a decision to improve safety, you can actually immerse yourself in the scene itself. You can see here from the city of Montreal, we can choose various different roadways, and we can choose different modes of transportation to put ourselves in. Here's an example if you're in a vehicle. We are using real data from the city of Montreal in this case in terms of what is the congestion level, what is the volume of traffic of different modes on the roadways, what does the scenery look like. So it really is immersive and true to life. You are then able to put yourself in this scenario. So really this is about making an emotional connection to the way that the roadway actually feels, in this case when you're driving in a vehicle. While you're going down this scene, you can kind of go beyond just modeling and simulation, but into education, into better decision making in order to improve the safety of the roadways. So driving in a car is one thing, and we can then choose different modes. This prototype that we built, which was in conjunction with the City of Montreal, also supported by the City of Toronto and Halifax Regional Municipality and ITS Canada, you can then choose For example, being on a bicycle, right? So being on a bicycle, if you're like me and you do a lot of cycling in the city, if you're doing this in this scenario with no dedicated bike lane, I think you know how that feels. But if you've never ridden a bicycle in this scenario, this solution in VR is an excellent way to actually connect with the level of safety in real life. What if we did have a bicycle lane? So this is where we can model and simulate different scenarios in real time. This is extremely fast, obviously much faster than truly building out the bike lane to see what that would be like. And here immediately as a cyclist, I get a much, much safer experience. So I'm riding down the bike lane and I no longer feel threatened by the vehicles driving by me. If you'd like to try this solution yourself, visit our transportation kiosk in the exhibition hall after the plenary. The second solution I wanted to show you is about traffic congestion. So I think those of you who drive around any street in any of our major cities are aware that traffic congestion is a major, major issue, not only for productivity and the economy, but for our mental health as well. The most exacerbating factor, as you can see here in the media, is construction. We have to do construction. We're building our cities. That is a necessity. And this is largely to blame. This is a major cause of lane closures. The City of Toronto has recently implemented a new digital process in order to have contractors log and request permission to close a lane. This is called RODARs. It was implemented with our Esri business partner Transnobis, who are here with us today. This is an excellent process. It gets everything in terms of permits for lane closures into a digital system. You can see here that we have actually mapped all of the lane closures and actually correlated that with what number of bus routes are impacted, what number of cycling routes are impacted by all of these lane closures. So that is one level of detail. You can also see all of the kind of congestion levels correlated with those lane closures. However, the next question we asked ourselves was, what if there are lane closures that do not have a permit? What about those? So we created a solution with our Esri business partner Raven Connected. They make this device, which is an onboard unit on a vehicle. So it sits on your dashboard, and on the front here is a road-facing camera. The beauty of this solution is that these are already deployed in every major city in Canada. So we have data flowing in from all of these already. What we did was we took the data from the Raven unit and we correlated that with the city's permit database, in this case, City of Toronto RODARs. And here's what we found. So you can see on this map, all of the orange icons are the permitted lane closures. And then if we zoom in a little bit more, you'll see there are red and green polygons. The red polygons are where there is no permit. Let me show you an example. Let's start with one where there is a permit. So if we go to Queen's Park, if any of you are driving around Toronto, you're probably familiar with this. Let's see what the Raven saw. You can see this picture. I'll blow it up for you a little bit. Oh, fair enough. Construction, lane closures, but there is a permit, so that's all good. We'd like this to be cleared as soon as possible, but no issue there. Let's look at a different example. If I go to another example, let's say a little bit north on Oriole Parkway, you'll see that in this example, we have a red polygon, and this means there is no road closure permit here. What do we have? As we can see from the Raven imagery, there's a construction vehicle parked in a live lane. Maybe there was a permit before, maybe it just hasn't been moved out of the way. Either way, this shouldn't be here. This is a great solution to help any city prioritize their enforcement of reopening lanes that should be open in the first place, and one of many ways that we can start to improve roadway congestion and get the traffic flowing. With that, I want to pass it over to Matt, who's going to show us an example of this in a 3D digital twin.
All right. Thanks, Dan. So we're going to get this up on the screen. You're looking at a digital twin application for Toronto. And the first thing we want to point out here is a brand new offering. We've partnered with Google to produce a Google photorealistic 3D base map. And if you're taking notes, this base map is going to be available in ArcGIS Pro at 3.6, the next release of ArcGIS Pro. If you're a pro user and you're connected to ArcGIS Online, you're going to get this base map. And you can see that it really it really starts to bring your GIS to life. It breathes life into a 3D environment. Worldwide coverage, high fidelity detail in many of the urban areas. We're going to turn on some sensor information here. Our bike share stations, right? These bike share stations, let's click on one of these right here. So it's using smart mapping, right? Red color all the way to green. Green means lots of availability at a particular bike share station. Here are 0 e-bikes available, but 44 classic e-bikes. So smart mapping works really nicely with this new Google photorealistic 3D base map. Let's do this, and I'll turn those off. Let's look at some of the sensor information that Dan was just talking about in his 2D demonstration. So, road closures. There are lots of road closures and permitted work going on in the city, as we saw in Dan's demonstration. We'll click on one just to kind of get a look at what's going on in a particular area. The next thing we want to do is connect to that Raven system that Dan was just showing. So to do that, I'm going to turn this Raven layer on, and we're going to zoom right down to Avenue Road and Bloor Street, the Royal Ontario Museum. And our friends at Raven, in addition to producing this wonderful data set from these dashboard cameras, have also published that data as an oriented imagery layer. So if you're taking notes, that's another thing that you can do with ArcGIS, is publish the camera information with the data. So if we zoom in here, this is the Royal Ontario Museum. I'm going to click on one of these view sheds, and we get an oriented imagery viewer, which will let us look in 3D. So if I zoom in on the right, watch the left-hand side, and we'll do this, and we'll kind of look around inside the photo on the right and be able to see what's going on in the 3D scene view on the left. So this is an oriented imagery layer and a viewer that just works in the scene viewer. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Alex.
Thank you, Matt. Oh, thank you, Matt and Daniel. Unbelievable. You'll never look at another Amazon delivery vehicle the same. Wave when they drive up. So another thing that we really doubled down on over the last 6 years has been strengthening our planning, housing, and land capabilities. In fact, we have a complete business unit now that's just doing this work. It ranges from land information management, mapping parcels, both in provincial government, this beautiful map from the Land Title and Survey Authority at BC, who do all BC's mapping. They're here today, or the District of Saanich with their digital twin built in ArcGIS Urban for doing reimagining what a whole city is going to look like. But one of my longtime friends, who I mentioned earlier, who I met way back in 1983, Scott Morehouse, had retired a few years ago, and he's been spending his time thinking about the future of planning. And he's drawn this diagram that says, from the far left is reality, those cars out on the road. And as we get data from them, we slowly pass it through a process that ultimately leads to a community decision, whatever that decision needs to be made. And those decisions, of course, have an entire chain that they have to pass through. They have to be, of course, managed by ArcGIS software, and I'll have a bit more detail on this in a minute, where that first pillar is what you are doing, most of you are doing today. Then there has to be content that's curated and brought together. Then that content has to be modeled in a specific way for a particular solution. Looking at this a little bit more graphically, and bear with me, this slide is complicated, but on the left-hand side, start on the left again, like Scott did. Many of you work for authorities who are managing their assets or managing work or analyzing and modeling that work or doing planning and design. Many things that you do, but you are creating, maintaining, and operating some kind of infrastructure, soft infrastructure like Land Title and Survey Authority or Terranet here in Ontario, or hard infrastructure like a pipeline or roads or railways. And GIS is foundational to that. Many of you are sharing your data today, and to facilitators who are putting it into ready-to-use content. Those are the provincial mapping agencies who curate and bring data together. That's our Community Map of Canada is doing that as well. Then others are taking that data and putting it into the information models that Scott talked about that are specific for a decision to be made, allowing organizers of our society to collaborate with each other and make sure that the subway is put down where you can actually build it. I'm talking about a real situation here in Toronto where they ran into all kinds of things underground that they didn't expect to do. Could that have been avoided? Well, we certainly think that if we built out collectively this environment, we would. So the first pillar, ArcGIS, continues to be a way to share and collaborate across all organizations. More and more, it's being used not just in GIS and mapping, but every part of asset management and work management. And I won't spend too much time on this because I want to get to the second part of this quickly, which is the data and content. You are contributing your data through open data. This is not something I'm saying you should do this. You're doing this. There are amazing numbers of open data sites across organizations. And with NG911, data that you now put up in your open data site, if you're a municipality, you're going to be required to submit that to Bell if it's in your territory, or SaskTel or TELUS in a specific format. And then you'll want to publish that as well simultaneously through your open data site, so other data that police departments may be harvesting or emergency responders may be harvesting matches that data that's in the 911 calling system. And we're working with the community maps to build this out. Here we're seeing that in this year so far, there have been 36 million unique visits to the community maps and over 1 billion views. So like health and like transportation, we started creating a whole organization based on planning, housing, and land. And we looked around for resources. We had some people in the company that knew how to use urban. We brought them together. But ultimately, we got introduced in 2021 to Monika Jaroszonek and Aaron Morrow, who had founded a company called Ratio City. And their mission was to bring open data tools, to provide tools to housing developers and municipalities, planners and architects, to let them know where they can build and where. So this team joined us in 2023, and this is an example of what they're doing. They provide the focus on the third pillar, which is providing solutions that leverage the work that you're doing, leverage the open data. And I'm going to turn things over to Monika, who's going to give us a look at the future of this that she's been working with a business partner of ours, Hauser Levine. Monika.
Good morning. I'm excited this morning to share an example of an AI application that we're piloting with the City of Cornwall. So I'm going to start with a thank you to Cornwall. They're longtime customers. They've got a great open data site, and it's been a pleasure working with their planning and GIS teams on this pilot. Hauser Levine is an Esri partner and urban planning firm who specialize in providing leading-edge geospatial solutions within the planning space. I'm excited to show you their Euclid HL product. So Euclid is a public-facing, AI-powered planning and zoning assistant. It answers general and geospatial questions about planning policy. Questions like, can I build a triplex at 112 St. Felix Street? So the zoning assistant provides an easy-to-use natural language interface to reduce municipal front desk planning inquiries. This frees up urban planners and GIS folks to focus on higher value tasks. It's trained on a municipality's own planning policies and GIS data. So here we can see that it's identified the property is within a residential 15 zone, which is a low density area. It's summarizing some of the key standards that apply, so whether it's minimum lot frontage, minimum lot area, describing some of the setbacks, maximum lot occupancy, and the like. It's also picking up that there's a site-specific zoning exception on this address specifically, which modifies that residential 15 zone. And that modification allows for a duplex dwelling on this property, which is actually an exception to the standard residential 15 zone. It then concludes that duplex dwellings are permitted under the property, but a triplex is not explicitly permitted under the current zoning bylaw. So this assistant can also answer more complex questions. Questions like, what are the goals of the Cornwall waterfront plan? So it's using a large language model trained on urban planning concepts. And Housel Levine has got decades of experience in this space, and that they've used this experience in the planning industry to calibrate the model and then verify the responses. So the model is returning a response based on the text of the Cornwall official plan, the Cornwall zoning bylaw, and the waterfront plan. So here we can see that it is summarizing the official plan. It's going to give me the major goals of the plan. It will talk about some of the other objectives from the waterfront plan. It will also suggest some follow-up questions, and it also loads the official plan land use map here. So let's say I really want to dig in deeper and to understand how angular planes might impact building height and massing within waterfront zoning districts like the Central Business District. So Euclid is an AI agent, and so under the hood, what it's doing is it's using reasoning to determine which of those policies it needs to refer to answer this specific question, and then it's evaluating all the potential responses to find the best one. So here we can see that it is defining angular plane and how they're measured. It's describing the effect on building height and massing. It's picking up some details about the Central Business District and talking about the practical impact. In addition to all of that text, it's also surfacing a diagram directly from the zoning bylaw that can explain this concept a bit more clearly. So this kind of an interface can be a great resource for the public and residents to understand how their cities are growing and changing in the future. So let's say as a resident, I want to understand what the redevelopment plans are for the dry docks. So Euclid can also integrate with ArcGIS Urban and City Engine. So this scene was exported from City Engine in order to allow the public to interact with the plans and policies in 3 dimensions and very dynamically. There we go. So this is a pretty exciting pilot. And I think this idea of an interface that allows the public to ask plain language questions about planning policy and zoning and see the responses either as text, diagrams on a map, or in 3D is quite exciting. But not only that, we're excited to see more and more of these kinds of AI, agentic AI applications coming in the future that are going to be based on and leveraging your GIS data in order to solve all the complex challenges that our communities are facing. I'd like to invite you to swing by the community planning kiosk throughout the day and tomorrow to meet Rob from the Euclid HL team and to learn about all of our planning and housing products and solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Monika. So Monika's leading a substantial sized team here now, and in particular, implement Scott's vision of the future of planning. And it's a huge challenge, but Monika's up to it, having built with Erin her own company. She's an architect by profession, but now a GIS geek and a planner and an AI wizaroo after going through this. So thank you, Monika.
Thank you.
So in summary, if we're going to create a sustainable future for our world, and our world is different meanings. It could be the planet, it could be just the world we live in, our community, our neighborhood. Each of us have our own idea of what our world is. We're going to need to connect Canada together, connect Canadians together into a national GIS network. And this is a big challenge to help us understand how our environmental systems work, how our economic systems work, how our social systems work. And we've been working in the economic side with Zita Cobb and the Community Foundations of Canada on the economic side. You heard about the United Way on the social side, and you heard about the environmental systems that we've done from Ducks Unlimited. But I met Guan and I and and Madison were at a conference, and Clark Lawler from Ottawa were at a conference in Ottawa that the Trans-Canada Trail put on. It was called the World Trails Conference, and they sponsored it. And their keynote speaker, Harvey Locke, when I showed him this diagram, he said, you know, that's a false premise. And I thought, that's okay. What's false about it? He says, there's not 3 circles that are overlapping. There's one big circle. It's called nature. And nature is being sucked into the holes of each one of those, and that we need to find ways to preserve nature. So I'm extremely pleased to announce that today, well, last week actually, and Friday in Ottawa, we announced a special partnership with the Canadian Wildlife Federation to develop a Canadian Centre for Nature-Based Education. Now, we're just one of 28 organizations around this. Some of them are putting in lots of money. One of our business partners, the 407, is putting money in, lots of others. But the CEO of the Canadian Wildlife Federation is going to be our keynote speaker tomorrow to talk about what they're doing. They're a federation, so there's many other wildlife organizations, the Ontario Hunters and Anglers, Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, many others. And he's going to talk to us about what they're doing, and then he and I are going to have a conversation back and forth with each other. So if you have any questions you want me to ask Sean, grab me here today. And you will not want to miss this. Sean is a dynamic speaker, and the topic is incredibly interesting. So I'm going to invite Matt English to come out here and start the next phase of our presentations and demos. And thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.